Hi everyone, and welcome to another wonderful session, which is part of our free and radical creative online series, which is for radical pioneers. And we've got this wonderful session titled How to Make a Radio Station and Record on a Record Label from Scratch, with Tom from Zaatari Radio and Blue Maignien of Cherchez Encore. Just to remind everyone that this session is being recorded, and that if anyone wants to kind of turn on the transcriptions, you can do so at the bottom. And just to introduce myself, my name is Majid. I'm a black male wearing a beige cap facing forwards with a grey hoodie and a bit of a small grizzly beard. And just also let people know before we get started, I want to share my screen and share this really amazing opportunity that we've got for everyone. And just to let people know as well, I'm one of the non-executive directors of Tour de Moon, and as well as founder director of Union of Justice. Cool. So if anyone is interested, I'd like to think many of you are, we have got £1 million that we are basically giving out to creatives, and literally we've got all sorts of things. So if anyone's interested in creating an immersive film, we've got £25,000 we can give. We've got £3,000 to make a short film. And if you wanted to kind of contribute a piece of digital artwork, you can do, to like writing a short play if you want to perform, to even like DJ, you name it. Literally, even if you're a writer, you can contribute to our zine. And yeah, honestly, there's so many amazing things that people can get involved. So I encourage you all to go on tourdemoon.com/apply. And if it's not for you, of course, you can share it with all your family and friends and your networks, and basically. Cool. So also just to kind of hand it over to our two amazing guests, like I said, Tom and Blue. And just before we get started, if everyone can please just put themselves on mute, just to kind of avoid any minimize background noise, that would be really, really amazing. I'm now just going to hand it over first and foremost to Blue. And Blue, if you can visually introduce yourself as well as verbally, and just give a bit of a short description in terms of your role and your experience, and then you can go into answering the topic that everyone's kind of come and to discuss today, and then we'll head over to Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for having me. So I'm assuming you can hear me fine. Just let me know if there's any issue. So my name is Blue. I'm a white non-binary person. I use they and them pronouns. I have like a dark woolen jumper right now, and I have short brown hair and blue eyes. Yeah, and I'm in my room in London right now. So that's where I'm speaking from. So I'm just going to be talking about the music label side of things. That's why I'm here. Since 2017, I've been co-running a music label called Cherchez Encore. And I'm also a musician, although not really have survived the lockdown, I have to admit. And actually my day-to-day job, I'm a librarian. So that's for me. Should I just go straight in? Are you happy for me to?
Yeah, just go straight in.
Cool. I mean, I've got some slides, but maybe it's not necessary. I just share them. Maybe it can just be a bit conversational. I don't know. What do you think?
If you want, it's entirely up to you. Like, if you want to share your screen, we can give you access to share the screen if you'd like.
That's cool. You know what? Let's just keep it as it is. I think it's fine. I don't need to.
No,
I can just share them after, and if you want to post them and stuff, that's cool.
That'd be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, and just to say, I mean, in the slides anyway, there was no visual content at all, so I wouldn't have anything to describe and stuff. Cool. So okay, so I'll just try and get started then. Also, please interrupt me if I'm just going over time, because I probed this pretty quickly. So yeah.
No problem.
Cool. So yeah, as I said, Cherchez Encore is like a music label, mostly electronic music label. It's been massively influenced by new things happening in live coding music. So, and we started in 2017 in South East London. So Right now we have 20 releases out, and we have 4 more plans for 2022. Mostly we share our music through Bandcamp. So there's a few stats from that. We have like over 25,000 plays through that, and made close to grand sales for artists. We've also run around like 8 events across different community spaces in London and DIY venues and unlicensed spaces as well. We've had quite a few radio plays. So we've been on like shows on BBC Six, on NTS, Mazazef in Tunis, 1020 in Bristol, and a few press mentioned like The Wire, Mix Mag, HNB, quite a few places like this. So yeah. So that's just a little bit about Cherche Encore, but I really want to just be super concrete, or like try to be as concrete as possible about how do you start a music label from scratch, right? So what do you need to start a music label? The first thing you need is an email address and a website. So a website is a domain name and a way to host it, and then a way to edit the website. So you can what we have is that we bought a domain name, which is cherche-encore.info. And we bought it from, am I allowed to give brand names? Sorry, can I just refer to stuff? Or
yeah, of course.
Cool. So we bought our domain name from GoDaddy, and then our mate is hosting our website for free. So thanks to Henry for that. And then you want somewhere to sell your music, right? So the best way to do that today, from where I stand, is to do it on Bandcamp. And after you have a place to be contacted, and then your website, and then you have a place to sell music, you also need a way to give updates. So let's just have some kind of communication strategy, right? So that's the basic structure of a music label, okay? And then what's the basic workflow for us? First, you receive a demo, or you commission someone to make music. The second thing that happens after that is that you support the artist through the creative process. So I'll explain a bit more what that means for us in a bit. Then once the music's ready, you want to arrange for mixing and mastering. So mixing is not the same as mastering, and I can give some detail, but it's not super important. And most of the time, the expectation is that a label arranges for that. And I think that's good practice. Then you want an artwork for the release. You want a music video maybe, and you want to have some kind of communication or marketing strategy for it. And once you've done that, the release is out. Cool, congratulations, you've got music out. So I maybe just want to talk a little bit about now what's the, I want to call it the business model of Cherche Encore. I don't know if it's a bit dry, but let's go for that.
It's not dry. I think it's really important, to be fair.
Yeah. I think it's really,
yeah. Sorry, go off. For many people, of course, they can be like, I just want to start selling music, but there's a lot of work that goes behind it to make it successful. So please speak on.
Yeah. So, I mean, how do you make music from, how do you make money from music label is kind of the expectation of the big question. Traditionally, you make music from sales, right? So you make money from sales, so I'm getting there. So sales from your music, or the artist you support's music, sales from events, ticketed events, sales from miscellaneous stuff, so maybe merch, maybe things like this, and public funding. And I'm going to talk a tiny bit about public funding a bit later. So a big thing for us is, when I said I think the best way to distribute music as a label is to use Bandcamp, I'm kind of referring to the way that music distribution has changed super fast. And originally, like, music labels were mostly seen as major label commercial entities, right? And now we're in a position where a lot of music is actually self-released online. So it's a big question mark as to what's the purpose of a music label nowadays in this context. And obviously I'm just talking about the context of putting out some music in London, I guess. But from my experience, like the biggest worry is that you can see it when you start a music label. There's so little money circulating in the music industry. And by that, I mean, it's hoarded, like it's hoarded somewhere else. And obviously, one of the reason why there's so little money circulated in this industry is the way that music is being streamed right now, I think. But I'm not an expert, so I might just not stay on that very long. And I also just want to highlight that starting a music label from scratch is actually the reality of it, and my experience of it is that it's really hard to do without either pre-existing capital or being really, really good at fundraising. And by pre-existing capital, I guess I mean like either you're able to bring a bit money forward, maybe because you have a job on the side. A lot of artists, they have a job on the side. And that's in fact the way they prefer to do things. Or because, but also bringing capital, by that I mean it's like you're able to work with people who don't necessarily rely financially on the sales that you're going to make, right? So, and that's one of the reasons why it's so hard for working class artists to, do stuff. It's because like there's so much expectation of free labor. So, and even if you're really, really good at fundraising, which in itself is a full-time job, I want to say you can really only do that successfully, in my experience, when you've already established yourself a little bit. So you're still going to have so much free work to do before that. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a grim reality, but I think it's important to highlight because there's so many questions around what's the point of a music label today, and I'm trying to think about those questions. So, okay, next, I want to talk about how to communicate and about how to communicate as a music label. What's the marketing strategy? The first thing that I want to highlight that is so important for me is develop music press contacts. Okay, so if you read about music somewhere, go on the contact tab, check who's responsible for the premiere or for like premieres on the press outlet, and take their email and make a list. That can be anyone that puts music reviews on the blog, established press partners, even people who just tweet about music they like, that have a big following that you like. Just make a list of people that you will send your music consistently. And I have to say, for me, the most optimal way to communicate is to at least give 2 months to press partners to like review the music. So if you want them to write something about it, 2 months is a good time. 1 month is okay. Anything below a month is really not ideal. Cool. To communicate about a music label, also running events and like picking listing platforms is a really good way to do that. Try to search for other listing platforms. Like I'm thinking in electronic music, people think about Resident Violet a lot, but like how about other great places like Another Subculture is a really, really cool one. And then there's the social media, or what I call the burden of social media. I think it's a really difficult one for me to answer because at Cherche Encore or historically refuse to use social media, mostly because it's so impactful. It takes so much work and it drags us down a lot. It feels really difficult work to do. It's worth noting that everyone that runs Cherche Encore is like a disabled person, so we have loads of access needs, and social media takes a lot of energy out of us. So, but if you're going to do social media, trying to be consistent, trying to consistently post and use everything, all of the things available on the social media platform you're going to use. Try to make your content engaging. So is it clear? Does it have all the information it needs? And try to make your content accessible. That's really, really important. Can you provide alt text like description and stuff like that for visual content? Other stuff for communication that is really important is that we use a lot more than social media is newsletter. It's a really good one. You can do really good stuff with building a following list with newsletter. And if you're using Bandcamp, make use of the Bandcamp subscriber list. That's a really, really cool one. There's a lot of opportunity there. Start a radio residency. Try and showcase the label's music on the radio. There's loads of really cool ones in London at the moment. We have a residency at RTM Radio, which is in Thamesmead, and it's a really cool space. I recommend it. They're actually looking for new residencies right now if you're interested. And then if you are going to put your music on streaming platform like Spotify and stuff, there's bundles that you can acquire. So there's like one is DistroKid, for example, it's a really good one. Although I have some serious beef against streaming platform. Consider music cooperative as well. There's quite a few around. So like streaming cooperative, so it's like streaming platform artist owned. I forgot the names of the one I was thinking about, but I can think about that. And then there's like other sales platform that are specialized. So maybe like in electronic music, I'm thinking about Leap or what else there is. Oh, the words are not coming out of my mouth. Yeah, Juno is another one. I mean, there's loads basically. So just try and think about that. But for any marketing that you're going to do, invest in accessibility as much as possible. Is your website completely inaccessible? And if so, what's the point? Like, that's just a really important thing to think about. Cool. I want to talk a little about public funding because I think it's really important. And people don't think that music label can get public funding in England. But it is possible. So I'm mostly going to be speaking about in England, because I don't know about everywhere else. And even in Scotland and Wales, it's different in England. So just that's the context I'm talking about. You can get money for music projects through Arts Council England. It is possible, although it is really hard, and I'm not going to lie, it's really hard. So the main route for that is the national lottery project grants through Arts Council England. So that's the main route for that. It is a full-time job to apply for those in itself. Give yourself the time to read about the guidelines. It's really, really complicated, but it is worth a shot. So I do want to highlight that ACE is terrible at funding music. They mostly don't fund music. And if they do fund music, they mostly fund classical music and opera. That's the reality of it. The stats out there are pretty bad. I know they're trying to change that, but it's still the reality. So yeah, how to successfully apply to ACE, read the guidelines over and over and over again. There's no two ways about that. Just bear in mind that for music related project, ACE won't fund stuff that they call promotional material. So if a music video, for example, they think it's promotional material and they won't fund that. So you have to show that a music video in itself is an artwork, not just something to make promotional work, like to communicate about. Do you know what I mean? So that's a big one for music projects. Give yourself the time to do it. Reach out to people with experiences, look for successful applications like the White Pube successful application library is a really good one. And assess your support network. So basically applying for money through ACE is a lot about what your connections are, I guess. And just think about what you get for free. Like, is someone willing to lend you some stuff for free? Great, put it in the application. Is someone willing to do a write-up for you? Great, put it in the application. All of these small connections you have, just try and like switch them on into like a sort of a professional setting. Like, why are all your mates around you? What can they do for you? How can they vouch for your projects? That's a really big part of applying for money. And then the other way to fund money publicly is through PRS. So PRS is two different things, and it's not easy to understand what they are, but they're two different things. On one side, they're PRS for music, which is a royalty service. And on the other side is PRS Foundation, which is a grant-making organization. And big, quite well-established labels sometimes get sort of like important grants. For example, non-classical music label is a PRS Foundation Talent Development Partner. That's what they call it. So it is possible to be supported as a cultural organization from public money, but it is hard. But these are the two ways that I know of. If anyone has any other knowledge of public funding for music labels, please shout. I'm very interested. And I want to touch a tad on copyright. The first thing I want to say is that if you're not transparent about what your copyright agreement is going to be with your artist, like, it's just not cool. It's not the point. For us, so historically major labels own masters. Like, for example, people will put music out and then their contract says, okay, now that your music is out, we own the masters. So you can't do anything with it. We think that's awful at Transnational. That's like a really rubbish practice, and we're never going to support that. So we say full rights retentions for authors now, forever, meaning you're an artist and you keep the music, it doesn't belong to the label. Be very clear about the sales agreement. How are you going to split the sales of your music? So what we do is that we take 30% of sales after the artist has reached £150. So they have £150 of the sales, and then we take 30% on top of that. And even that's on a case-by-case basis. So depending on their circumstances, we like very, very open to change that. It's important to think about, licensing. A lot of musicians today choose to release their songs with Creative Commons licenses. So try and think a little bit about that as well. If you're going to be a music label, it's really important that the music law is really complicated, and yeah, it's worth looking into. But yeah, be completely transparent to the artists you're going to support about how you're going to do this. That's my key thing, and just be fair as well. It's otherwise rubbish. And the last thing I want to talk about, which can be really the most important thing, is creative decision making and how to support artist development. So the first question you want to ask yourself is like, who do you want to support? Who do you want music? What genre of music? What's the scene? Who do you want to support? And then, you can choose to be a music label that supports a particular demographic, and that's completely fine. That's amazing. Like, if you want to be a music label that supports women and non-binary people, that's great. But if you don't have a particular demographic, you still need to think about who you're going to be supporting. It can't just be only like cis straight white men. Like, you can't just be only white people. You can't just be only wealthy or educated people as well. Like, if it is the case, maybe ask yourself why. What's what's going on for you to be in this position, I think. Then once you start working with artists, like, that's my favorite part of the job, I think. Spend the time with them once they talk to you about their project. Like, how can you support them? Maybe through creative blocks, maybe through writer's blocks. Like, how can you help them finish up a project? I mean, we basically mostly release music of emerging artists, people who have never released music before at Cherche Encore. That's our that's where we start. So a lot of our time is spent sharing skills with people. So my tips to support a healthy creative community as a music label is peer review is a good approach. If once you have a couple of artists in the catalog, can they help each other, giving each other feedback? Is that possible? Can you facilitate that? And can you organize skill sharing events? So maybe for the public, but also just for the artists you're supporting. Like if someone knows how to use a particular piece of hardware, are they willing to explain to the other artist how to do that? And can you make that an event for your label? And try and seek opportunities on behalf of your artist. I mean, for example, Tour de Moon has, this great financial opportunity. That's something I might be highlighting to the artist on the label. I might be showing stuff like that to them. And using the radio residency is a really good way to create opportunity as well. So the way we use the radio residency is that every time someone puts out music, they have a show as well. And then other cool example of creative communities that work, I think, for example, there's a label called Old Center that I really like, that runs a really active Discord server. So it's a really cool one, and they have like competition on it, and they have a really active creative community. So that might be a really cool example. Cool. And that's it for me. I try to be like as thorough as possible.
Yeah, and to be fair, you just haven't got the time to really go into because there's so much we can talk about. In all honesty, like so I've got so many questions, but we'll get into later on. But
cool.
Just wants to bring in and wonderful Tom from Zaatari Radio. Tom, if you can visually describe yourself, let the people know what it is that you do. Tell them a bit about what Zaatari Radio is, and I guess more fundamentally, like it's how easy, difficult, what is the process, I guess, in trying to set up your own radio station?
Hello, everybody. My name's Tom. I am a white male. I have my hair tied back at the moment with a little bit of curliness to the left. It's brown. I'm wearing a black jumper, and I am in my office/studio in South London right now. I went for the PowerPoint slide, actually, just because I think
that's fine. Sorry, did you say you had a PowerPoint slide? Did you say? Yeah,
I can't actually remember how to share it on Zoom. It's been a while.
So do you know that green button that says share?
Oh yeah, the one that says share screen right in the middle.
Don't worry, mate. It's happened to all of us.
Here we go. Share. And yeah, I think I am likely to echo quite a lot of sentiment of Blue. I've perhaps maybe diverged a little bit with, say, funding. But yeah, how to make a radio station from scratch. This is through a project I've been working on since 2017 with a number of other people called Zaatari Radio. And we very much focus on a DIY ethos and kind of a general rule of thumb of just trying to make it work. So yeah, this is Zaatari Radio. It is located in Zaatari refugee camp in the north of Jordan. It's about 15 kilometers from Syria, and it has 40,000 Syrian refugees living there. And there's also a formal, this is in the informal camp where the radio is hosted. And there's a formal refugee camp as well, run by UNHCR. And there's about 80,000 Syrian people living there. This is just a quick snapshot of what Zaatari village looks like. It's quite a strange mixture of tented housing, semi-permanent housing, and these kind of extravagant villas that are being resurrected. That's partly because it also sits on the Silk Road, where a lot of drugs pass through the area into Europe and beyond. So I think not only are we going to be talking about how to start a radio from scratch, there's also very much a humanitarian project as well. So it's going to be kind of a combination of both. So talking about the practicalities of radio, and also it can be applied more generally to getting involved in projects such as this. A very important question to ask is sort of why radio? I believe radio is a really sort of powerful tool Being in London right now, London has a really prominent history of pirate radio, and that in itself has a really strong connection to DIY communities. The picture on the left is some radio masts in West London, really kind of following that idea of making it work, throwing together what equipment you can to just get it broadcasting. And to the right of the PowerPoint slide is ranking Miss P. In 1981, she set up a radio station called Dread Broadcasting Corporation that was broadcasting reggae, soul and gospel music. And she lobbied for pirate radios to be considered community stations in Parliament. I think this idea of broadcasting reggae, soul and gospel was really interesting, as the idea of being sort of a tool for marginalized music as well as people. This kind of speaks to the Windrush generation of the time, like first generation, second generation, and these genres weren't getting radio air in prominent radio stations. So kind of pirate radio was seen as a means to sort of seize cultural production, basically. This is a photo from the 1990s of a kind of underground jungle party, because sort of jungle, garage and grime, and even more recently drill music is very much come to be associated with sort of pirate DIY radio stations. I think what these genres all have in common is, one, they're sort of marginalized and more prominent radio stations. And secondly, I'm going to sort of use the words of Louis Tudor Socky, who's an Afrofuturist and Black techno-poetic. And he's talked about dub here, but I think it's very applicable to the idea of jungle, garage, grime and drill, and how these genres are margins of first world corporate influence, where the humanity of its producers have been deemed liminal, if not virtual, and that it blends specifically Caribbean elements with Western technology means to make it essential as a form of technique of creolization, as well as productive of a new non-white and potentially non-male mythologies. That's quite a wordy quote, but basically they're kind of a technological means of cultural production that sort of challenge dominant discourse and narratives. Within refugee contexts, I just think this is a really powerful tool for marginalized communities to utilize a tool of narrative production, independent of more powerful actors such as journalists, larger NGOs and politicians who often reproduce violent discourse within these contexts. This is Mohammed. We met him in Jordan. He was born in Palestine and came to Jordan as a refugee in the 60s during the 6 Days War. And he has been working in radio since then, and also sort of utilizes it as an empowering tool within Palestinian communities in Jordan. So like Zaatari Radio, what did we do? So this is a picture of where the radio is hosted before we got there. It's a school in Zaatari village. It's run by an organization called Acting for Change International, and they provide remedial education to children and young adults there, but they wanted to make the school into more of a community center. So kind of before we even started, there was sort of two main questions to ask. Is radio appropriate within this context? So number one, Acting for Change International wanted to make it into more of a community center. And as we spoke about before, sort of radio has been used as a means for social organization historically. So it kind of fit that bill, as well as we kind of drew from more like needs assessment reports and Acting for Change International's understanding of the context. And a number of other issues were highlighted, such as like an information void for refugees living in the area to share important information that sort of might not necessarily filter through to where they were living, but as well as services sort of available to refugees, and to tackle like prevalent health issues as well was another way in which we thought the radio could be used positively in the context. So then it was next kind of like, how can we do it? And this here I'm going to talk about funding. I'd say one way that Blue didn't touch on, which is the way that we funded the radio, was through crowdfunding. I think that there is potential, perhaps, talking about like previous capital. It's not so much a long-term fundraising, it's like stable way to fundraise long-term, but you could generate at least like a startup capital through crowdfunding, and that's kind of what we did to get the project running for the first 2 years. And kind of looking within the context of humanitarian projects, we very much saw this as a community-centered way of fundraising. When you apply for grants from larger NGOs and governments, your kind of practices have to align with their policy interests, which for us, seeing radio as a kind of tool, like an empowering tool, it doesn't suit that kind of idea of more powerful actors such as states and larger NGOs to give funding to us, especially while working in an even more kind of marginalized context of Zaatari village, which is like an informal refugee camp. So yeah, crowdfunding was kind of a necessity, as well as a, in the end, I'd say a benefit, in which we kind of didn't have to say list a lot of deliverables within the project or the radio to get the funding. We kind of presented the idea, and then the community that supported us kind of trusted us in delivering that. But yeah, building a community is a really important thing you're going to have to do. One way that we did that, these two photos are of posters for parties that we hosted. The one on the left was in Bristol, and the one on the right was in London. And yeah, so kind of working with Acting for Change created the community of users in Zaatari, but we also needed a community support to like financially support the radio. So kind of teaming up with organizations based in London that kind of had a shared interest in radio. The party on the left was sponsored by 1020. Blue mentioned them earlier. They're based in Bristol. They're very much kind of like a DIY online radio that, you know, you can draw similarities between kind of people who host radio shows for 1020 as up and coming artists who perhaps follow more experimental music and gaining a platform and a foothold in the industry, compared to, say, refugees who are extremely marginalized people who could use a radio in an empowering sense, say. So yeah, so building the organization around the radio is really important for fundraising. Again, we, similar to what Blue said, we kind of rode the social media burden, which was a really useful tool for fundraising for the project and the radio, but then keeping people informed with what's going on in Zaatari and the issues that people face there. And I think you'd agree as well, these posters are like really nicely designed. Claire Thompson, who's been working with Zaatari Radio since 2017, is kind of the in-house designer. And especially at the start, when the radio was just an idea, like not even funded yet, you know, there's not any pictures you can show of what the radio is going to do or anything like that. Claire was just like really great at visually representing the radio and catching people's eye. And yeah, I think that's like super important. And if you kind of draw similarities between prominent radio stations, say in London, they're like online radio stations, they all have like a really strong digital and graphic like identity. So that is definitely worth looking into. And then it was like setting up the radio. This is literally us setting up the radio in Zaatari with the community there. And then from there, when the radio was set, we needed broadcasters. So we had to sort of set up workshops for skill sharing. Again, I'm speaking from my experience working in Zaatari within kind of the paradigms of a humanitarian project. So we kind of initially set up 2 months of open workshops for people to come who live around Zaatari to learn how to use the radio. And then from that, that's developed into sort of ongoing workshops for children and young adults to learn how to use radio, but then use radio as kind of an educational / creative tool. I think some of the next pictures here are some of the like early users of the radio. Here's some like examples of workshops we did. Here there's the setup, and then on the table are these musical instruments some of the children made to like broadcast, and it was also kind of a lesson. Well, it was just like an issue we highlighted with the kids of how can we improve the environment in which their school is, and trash was a big problem. So we kind of worked on creating musical instruments out of the trash that was lying around. And another way was documenting kind of life in Zaatari from the experiences of the children who are living there. We did a photo exhibition where the children got disposable cameras, took some photos, and then got them developed. And then we hosted them somewhere else in Zaatari, but then put the radio in the exhibition. And when people came to look at the photos, the children were broadcasting with from the radio station that was transmitting like into the room through the radio. And that was just like a really nice way to explore what life was like in Zaatari for these children, what kind of stories did they want to portray, also how they imagined their futures to be as well. So yeah, moving forward, we actually have a new project next year with an organization called Refuge Worldwide. I actually meant to talk about Refuge Worldwide earlier during the kind of idea about creating a community around the radio, kind of getting it started. They have a really cool setup as well. This is a good way to fundraise and like earn money to get the radio sustainable. They have like a patron system where you subscribe to be a member and you kind of get additional benefits of being a member, things like merchandise and access to radio shows early and track lists and stuff like that. And then they split that money 50-50 for the upkeep of their radio. They're like an online radio based in Berlin. And then they give 50% of that money to a charity. And at the moment, they're giving the 50% of the money to run Zaatari Radio in Jordan, as well as put the money to a project that we're working on next year in Amman with young people living in the city and kind of exploring migration histories and identity through radio production. So that's going to be really exciting. Here's like what you can do, and more kind of like practical look at what you need to get radio running and broadcasting. Disclaimer, like Zaatari Radio is an FM radio. When people talk, or when you see radio stations nowadays, or like kind of that London online radio station, it's kind of like different rules apply to that. I'll touch on that in a bit, but this is like more of the equipment you need for FM broadcasting. This is like a mixer, a microphone, a stand, the antenna. I don't even know what that thing is on the right. that's the thing about like radio, and I think this is why it has that history of being such a powerful tool, is that you don't need to be an expert. Number one, all this equipment costs less than £1,000, and it broadcasts probably like 15-kilometer radius. We bought it from a website online that does kind of like FM radio kits from kind of like startup, and it will broadcast within a kilometer radius, and it will cost like £100, to our one, which is 10, 15, 20 kilometers, and it's like £1,000, or it will do one that does like 300 kilometers, and it's probably like £10,000. But I think like as a startup for FM broadcasting, for the equipment, £1,000 is pretty like low barrier financially, as well as kind of like, yeah, you don't need to really be an expert. We kind of purchased this radio equipment, and in doing that, we got training for like half a day in how to use it. And then from that, we worked with, well, I didn't actually, this is not really my role in the organization, but we had kind of like a technical guy who then like developed that into like a workshop to teach people in Jordan, in Zaatari, to use it. And it's just kind of like enough straightforward that it's like easy to do. We actually have the manual that we share to the people in Zaatari to like refer back to if there's like an issue, and it kind of just says the really basics of where everything plugs in and how. If you're like interested in receiving that, just like put your name in the chat or your email or something, and I'll email it to you. But yeah, this is one of the kids drew their own kind of like draft of how to use the radio. The microphone goes into the amplifier, that then goes into the mixer, which isn't actually drawn here, and goes to the transmitter, and then up the mast through the aerial, and then the radio wave will just hit whatever radio was tuned into, 97.3 FM in a 15-kilometer radius of Zaatari. All the equipment fitted into 2 suitcases, which is also kind of a consideration if looking into like the paradigm of a humanitarian project, is that we had to bring it to Jordan. 2 suitcases. It was like an extra €100 of baggage weight, but we kind of budgeted that in the project. And I guess the next question, this is Tariq and Mohammed. Tariq is actually the son of the Palestinian guy that I showed earlier. And they say like, you don't really need to be an expert to use the radio. Kind of reaching out to experts is something I'd really recommend doing for advice. And also like if stuff goes wrong, obviously like the organization we bought the radio from were kind of the experts and taught us how to like at least put it together. And then we were able to learn enough to teach people how to do that. And now the people who we first taught teach new people, and it's just kind of an ongoing thing. And that's not really, that's not our role anymore as an organization. And yeah, a big part of that as well was like Tariq and Mohammed, who sort of fix the radio if there's ever a problem. And coming back into the FM radio, you have to be wary of the rules around FM radio. If you, again, pirate radio was illegal, and that was kind of, kind of pirating, it's in the name, pirating the airways. We were lucky enough to be able to sort of like, and this was through our partner organization, Acting for Change, which again is sort of feeds into reaching to the experts. They were kind of put us in contact with the local municipality, who are sort of pictured here. We did lots of like handshaking and drank tiny coffees and got the okay that we didn't need a license to broadcast. But we're working on this new project with a guy in Uganda right now, and we're having issues basically because the Ugandan authorities want us to register the project. So the budget has gone from a couple $1,000s to $80,000, because that's how much it costs to register a radio there. So depending on how you wish to use your radio and who's it for, consider FM radio versus online radio. As you can see, like online radio is very popular right now. That's because it doesn't have those sort of registratory laws. The equipment would be different. You have to run it through a program that you pay a monthly subscription for, and again, you play it for, you like run it through an amplifier that goes into your computer that will broadcast it through a website, basically. And it's pretty cheap. That's actually what we're looking to do for the project in Amman that we're going to do next year at Refuge Worldwide. But know the law, understand the law. Yeah, and that's kind of goes back to FM versus online. Here it is, 97.3 FM. And yeah, more generally, this is just, again, an outside picture of what Zaatari radio looks like. If you're thinking about starting a radio, do it. It's super fun. Just like an amazing tool with this incredible history of broadcasting amazing music and stories and people and knowledge. And just consider the DIY ethos of that you don't need to be an expert to do it. And if you find a problem, it's like a very passionate community. If you reach out to the right people, they'll help you and they'll get you going and they'll get you broadcasting. And then just kind of like, this one's to do with the radio and also more generally with the humanitarian project idea. Just kind of make it work. If you go back to that picture of what actual change looks like without the radio, it's within 10 months, it went from this really obscure idea of, yeah, you want it to be a community center, let's do a radio. And then a few months later, through reaching out to people, getting support from like a passionate community again of like music and dance music and electronic music to other radio stations, to then this like incredible radio broadcasting thing in Zaatari. And yeah, that's what I'd say. Not making a radio from scratch. It's neat done.
Amazing stuff. First of all, just some truly amazing photography, by the way. I don't know, like some of the pictures there were really, really great. And honestly, I just want to ask you guys both just very quick questions, because I know we're kind of short on time. I guess it kind of works for both record label and starting your own radio station. Is which one should people look to do first in terms of, is it important to build a community first, then set up the radio station, or is it best to do the create the radio station and build a community around that? And the second question is it best to gain experience first by, I guess, working and interning or just working, whether that be for an online or a basic FM radio station? Or do you think there's enough information out there online that will enable you to kind of just learn just by doing it, basically? So we'll first go to Blue.
Thanks. So your first question is it better to start it or to start building a community? My experience is that we started the music label because there were loads of people around us making music, including ourselves, and there was no space for it. So we started with the community, I guess. I mentioned live coded music. There was a lot of workshop happening, a lot of people experimenting stuff. And that's how I met a lot of the people that are now on the label. And I mentioned also it was their first releases. So we started the label because we had music to put out, and we tried to reach out, but there was a clear sense that maybe it was worth making a space for ourselves. So that's it, I guess.
Definitely.
And then the second question was, is it better to gain experience or to just go with a DIY approach and there's enough knowledge out there. I think there's Tom made like a really good point in saying that, you know, running a music label and running a radio has this incredibly rich and long and beautiful history of DIY practices. I think that's very true to say that you lose a lot if you professionalize your project immediately. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have the right skills or you don't do it properly, but I think there's a lot of space for experimentation when it's not your job, let's just say. And it's still not my job to do this. Although it's the thing that I prefer the most in life. As I say, I work in a library. I'm not a professional music label person.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And lastly, Tom.
I would also echo Blue's sentiment of Zaatari radio. Unfortunately, it's not my job. It's just kind of something that I am like passionate to do and would love an organization like that to be my job. But I think I think people who have that as a job are really lucky. And I wouldn't say start something like this or a record label because you're like, I want to make money and that's going to be my job. That's probably the wrong attitude to bring into it. But anyway, first of all, within the idea of a humanitarian project, make sure that there is a community there that will use it and need it or want it. That's just like so important. And then practically within more generally a radio, you might be wasting your time a little bit if you really want to start a radio, but there's maybe not an audience there for it. Blue mentioned
it's you and your parents.
Yeah, I mean that's not totally the worst thing. But like Blue mentioned sort of doing it.
Serving a community, just like
yeah, exactly. So don't just like start a radio, but then also maybe just start a radio and just do it. So,
or you can just send WhatsApp voice notes.
I mean, that is pretty much radio broadcasting.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's good.
And then with the and then just 100% never ever be put off by anything in life, but especially something like a radio, by not feeling like you can do it, because there is that community that will support you. It's like not, especially speaking from personal like experience, that it's not as hard as all those kind of like nice pictures might have looked, perhaps, with like all the technical pictures of it's just like really DIY. That's the beauty of it. You can just freaking do it without any experience and learn from other people and get involved and kind of learn as you do it. You can do that with radio for sure.
Brilliant. Great way to finish it off. On that note, please everyone join me in giving Blue and Tom a very, very big round of applause, virtual round of applause. Honestly, thank you so much for sharing both of your really inspiring pieces of work. And I definitely have taken a lot away from this. I'm sure everybody else has. So thank you very much.